What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Slate, the Thursday Sports Edition. Reed T. Fowler, Adam Kaufman. We are pleased to be here with you, and we will hit on multiple things. If we have time at the very end of the show, we could talk about a little two-game slate in the NBA. There's a large NHL slate. Get your bets in, get your NBA or NHL DFS lineups in as well. Of course, the return of baseball. We have an agreement, folks. Major League Baseball is returning. Opening day could be as early as April 7th. Stay tuned for that, but expect these players to report to Arizona, to Florida immediately. Let's get free agency going. But the things that are actively happening right now, Reed, you got NFL news all over the place, even in early to mid-March. NFL is king. And of course, the Players Championship, golf's fifth major. It's good to see you, my man. How are you?
Good. Yeah. I'm watching the Players Championship that was delayed for 4.5 hours today, which was always nice. Seeing the Khalil Mack trade. We'll get to that in a little bit and what that means for the AFC West and the Raiders, and some QB news that went down this week. But yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff's happening. It feels like football never ends. It feels like baseball can never begin. So,
yeah, I mean, it is amazing with football. I mean, we are at this point, basically a month removed from the Super Bowl, and we're still about a month and a half away from the draft. Free agency begins, I think, on Monday, right? I mean, so that's right around the corner. But yeah, these trades, these moves, these signings, and some big names. We spent a lot of time here on this show about this time last year saying, is this going to be the offseason where 1,000 high-profile quarterbacks move all around the NFL? And there was certainly movement, but not a ton of high-profile guys. This time around, we're starting to see it a little bit. Russell Wilson now becoming the first quarterback to ever in NFL history go from a team to a team that he once beat in a Super Bowl. No longer a Seattle Seahawk with his very brief goodbye on Twitter. He is now a Denver Bronco, a massive package. 5 picks, a couple of firsts, a couple of seconds among them, 3 players as well. Noah Fant and Shelby Harris, Drew Lock changing teams. So a blockbuster move there. Aaron Rodgers announced that we don't know definitively the terms, but he announced that he is staying put in Green Bay through his buddy Pat McAfee. You also have, of course, Carson Wentz somehow garnering a couple of thirds from Washington or Indianapolis, obviously getting those picks, and we'll see what direction they go in at quarterback. And then, like you said, the Khalil Mack trade and just other things that have been going on in the NFL. It's been pretty exciting, but the biggest one, obviously, Russell Wilson. What did you think of that move, and what do you think of this division?
Yeah, the division is extremely hard. It's going to be extremely difficult to get through. It's not going to be a cakewalk. Russell Wilson is used to that. I think that was not a lot of it, but definitely some part of it, that he has experience playing in a tough division, right? In the NFC West for all those years. Now he just moves to the AFC, stays on the West Coast, and he gets put into a team that is primed and ready. We talked about that last year. We talked about it when Cortland Sutton and these guys were getting extensions, and you're like, what in the hell is going on? These guys getting these massive extensions. It was because you need to set up the infrastructure for someone like Rodgers or Wilson to get, to lure them away from their comfy confines of where they played for, all of their careers. And now Russell Wilson gets, a pass first in Nathaniel Hackett offense. That was the gripe with Seattle, was that Pete Carroll wanted to, and Greg Olsen was on Cowherd's show, I think a couple of days ago on his podcast, and he was saying that, I'm paraphrasing here, that the Seahawks wanted to run the ball, play defense, punt, kick, field position, and then ask Russell Wilson in the fourth quarter to win the game. And they never really let him do his thing. And we saw that brief time, right? Last season, not this most recent, but the one before. The first 3 or 4 games, Russell Wilson was this MVP. He's putting up these massive numbers because they were letting Russ cook. And for whatever reason, there was like a 1 quarter or 1 half, and I forget exactly what it was, but there was an issue or a game maybe that they threw too much and Russ maybe threw a couple of picks. And in that game, in that second, it was a complete pivot. And Schottenheimer and those guys say, you know what? We're not doing that anymore. Hand the ball off 45 times for 2.5 yards a gain and a dust, pile of dirt. And they didn't let Russ cook. And now he's going to be able to, right? And so you really like that. The Raiders are going to be in a world of hurt. If I were them, I'd try to trade away Carr right now, right? Like Khalil Mack is coming. We know Carr does not do well with pressure. He has Bosa and now Mack. You have the Kansas City Chiefs that put up 40 points a game. right? Like you have the Broncos that like have a strong defense. If I were the Raiders, like start to rebuild a little bit, right? Get some picks. You got Josh McDaniels there. It's not going to happen, I don't think. But for Seattle, excuse me, for the Broncos, they get put, right in that position now to be competitive in the AFC West. Their odds essentially cut in half.
How do we feel about Russell Wilson, the player, right now? And I know he's certainly an upgrade over, Drew Lock or whatever other schlub Denver's been rolling out the last couple of years when Lock has either been benched or unavailable. But at the end of the day, I mean, we're still talking about a guy who, despite spending whatever it is, $1 million+ a year on his body and making sure he's in peak health, he's 33 years old. His numbers last year, and this is how it happens. We've seen it across NFL history. At some point in time, doesn't always happen, evenly in an off season with the start of a new year. Sometimes it happens in the middle of the year, whatever. But, from 2020 to 2021, there is a considerable statistical drop off for Russell Wilson. His numbers last year, and he missed a few games, due to injury, but completion percentage was down from 69 to 65 yards, more than 1,000 fewer than what he had the year before. Touchdowns basically cut in half, interceptions as well, to his credit. And, still sacked a considerable amount. And obviously that was one of the reasons he grew tired of the whole situation under Pete Carroll in Seattle. And his QB rating, lowest it's been since going back ever, lowest it's ever been, at not even 55, looking at ESPN stats here. And like you said, he's got a whole lot of pressure coming his way in that division. How sure are we that, people want to, I see all these graphics, that have been put out on social media since the trade and highlighting the likes of Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick and some of the other guys they have on that offense. And we're painting these Broncos like, watch out, Super Bowl contenders, here they come. And looking at the DraftKings Sportsbook, they're top 5 plus 1,200. Are you buying into this though?
I think I'm buying into the Broncos as a solid team. This bet, no, not at all. Right? Like this is when you see Bitcoin go up to $65,000 and you buy there and then it tanks. You don't buy it at the rise. You buy it when it dips. And so if the Broncos, if they lose a game, if they lose 2, if something happens and it's not like everything gets cracked up to be, and they fall to plus 2,000, then yeah, that's when I would buy it, because I think you have what you need there in a quarterback. And I do think Russell Wilson, because you have to kind of divorce Russell Wilson from his stats with Seattle. Seattle was never a pass first team. Pete Carroll never wanted to pass first. He never wanted to open up his offense. He would love to win each game 16-14 and maybe 3 safeties, right? That's what Pete Carroll wanted. He wanted to play defense. He wanted to run the ball. He wanted to control field position. And then he wanted to essentially have it be 1-score game and say, Russ, win us the game. So when you look at his numbers, and even though in spite of that, he put up solid numbers throughout his career, I would divorce that from what his potential is, which is someone who's probably not going to run anymore, but who's extremely accurate with the deep ball. And that's why Courtland Sutton, that's why we see Jerry Jeudy get talked up quite a bit, because these players, and especially Jeudy, is so young. You see what a guy like CeeDee Lamb can do in an offense that is pass first in Dallas, right? You see what Devontae Adams can do in an offense that is pass first. Now, I'm not comparing, right, like, some of these guys like Courtland Sutton to Devontae Adams, but that allows, when you have a quarterback, you don't have to worry. That's the other thing, Koff. When you don't have to worry about your quarterback, right, as a liability, which is what Drew Lock was, and Teddy Bridgewater never ascended to a point where he could become a liability. When you don't have to worry about that, that is massive when you talk about play calling. So, and look, Pete Carroll was never that guy. Shane Waldron was never that guy last year. Schottenheimer was never that guy. They never brought an offensive coordinator that was pass first in Seattle. And when they did, you saw what Seattle was able to do, right? But they also had a really good defense. So you can kind of have to take away those numbers and now look at the potential of what he could do on a good team.
DraftKings Sportsbook looking at the AFC West division. Chiefs are the favorites, understandably so, at plus 120, led by Mahomes and Hill and Kelsey, and the list goes on, obviously, and we know what they're capable of. Then you have Denver now, after this move, at plus 200. Then the Chargers, plus 350. I don't know if that factors in this edition of Khalil Mack or how much that would even move the odds anyway, but, obviously you're getting a guy who's been a Pro Bowler half a dozen times. And then your Raiders, I'm sorry, sitting at plus 1,000, led by Derek Carr, new head coach, new GM, obviously rebuilding, incredibly tough division. Are you ranking them personally as the odds sit right now, or would you flip anything?
Yeah, I mean, you have to, right? When you take a look at the Chargers, getting Khalil Mack, Khalil Mack at his peak was one of the best in the league, but he's been notoriously injured throughout his last few years in Chicago, right? I don't think he's played a full season in Chicago for the last couple of years. So that definitely, hurts quite a bit. Their number, I think, Koff, yesterday, because we talked about it on the slate yesterday with Emerson and Ulrich, that their number was at plus 400 yesterday. So it didn't really move. And the Broncos were there at plus 200. I'm just not buying any Broncos futures right now because I even if it's, even though it's, double your money, type of mentality here with Denver, if to win the division, still Kansas City at plus 120. I mean, they're not leaving. Like no one, they're probably going to re-sign Tyreek Hill, right? They're not going anywhere anytime soon. So I do think it's a 3-horse race. And the Raiders, they got to get lucky if they even want to compete in this division, because this division is going to be extremely hard.
Unless there's something you want to add on the Broncos and Russell Wilson, and just to move over to Aaron Rodgers here, which I think the dominoes here were really interesting. If you were following along, as I'm sure you were on social media as all of this was unfolding, because going into this offseason, obviously with Aaron Rodgers, former OC, going to Denver, becoming the new head coach there, a lot of skepticism. Is Aaron Rodgers going to wind up in Denver? Is this whole conversation that we just had, was that going to be about Aaron Rodgers going to the Broncos instead of Russell Wilson? We knew Wilson was a potential, obviously, to land there, but it became very clear that Wilson was option number 2, or the guy behind door number 2, because that trade happened, at least in terms of when it was announced. I don't know exactly when it happened. I'm not behind the scenes, but when it was announced, I mean, it was, hours, not even, after Aaron Rodgers came out through McAfee and said, yep, not retiring, going back to Green Bay. And, the reports from Ian Rappaport, it's a 4-year, $200 million deal. And then Rodgers comes out and says, slow down. What you're reading isn't necessarily totally correct, but it's going to happen. I'm going back. So we don't have the facts and figures, but we know this guy's going back to Green Bay. We know Devontae Adams is going back on the franchise tag. I don't think it should come as any shock that a guy goes from, I don't know, maybe I should retire, to a 4-year deal where he's the highest paid player in the NFL. Money talks. And also, I don't believe Rodgers ever realistically considered retiring. This was all he has wanted the last couple of years. This is, the respect from the organization. Respect is often, shown through money. He gets his payday. He becomes, that guy. Still a guy that hasn't won a Super Bowl in 11 years or whatever it's been, but he is that guy now in everybody's mind, and everyone will back off of him in the will he, won't he. He's got his home. Does anything change now in Green Bay, now that we know he's going back, now that we know Adams is going back, now that we know what this is going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, they need to win this year, or I mean, because you like Jordan Love's probably not going to be there. If he is, I get it, but why would you keep him?
Sure, try and get something for him.
You can get a lot for him, I think, for a guy who's never played a meaningful down in the NFL. I mean, yes, he did when Rodgers was a little banged up through COVID and everything, but you can get a pretty decent return on investment for a guy who hasn't really played any football whatsoever, because the quarterback market is so frothy and teams are looking for their guy. And Indy is looking for a quarterback, right? The Raiders might be in the market for a quarterback if Carr goes. I don't think he does, but they might be. The Giants are in the market for a quarterback. Mitch Trubisky getting tied there. And Daniel Jones might not have his position, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think for the Packers, you probably wasted a first-round pick in Jordan Love way back when. If you were and this is the thing about football. Like, we think these guys, because there's so much money that's thrown around, that they know what they're doing. Sometimes, and most of the time, Koff, they don't. And if they do, they never tell us the truth, right? So they never tell us what they're doing, and it's deliberate. Rodgers is not going to tell us. Bruce Arians is not going to tell us. Pete Carroll is definitely not going to tell us the truth at all. And this is kind of what you have to parse through when you're looking at futures odds. And so for Green Bay, all along, I thought Green Bay was a team that was going to land Rodgers because it just makes sense, right? The guy's 40 years old. Why does he want to go somewhere else and try to redo something all over the place? He said his intentions were clear when they lost that game in the playoffs. I don't want to do a rebuild. So the Packers had their marching orders, and they're not doing a rebuild. They're franchise tagging Adams. They're bringing back Rodgers. They're going to try and win. If Tyler Lockett is on the market too from Seattle, and they're doing a yard sale, imagine him in Green Bay, right? So that's
Sure.
They've tried to look for that Randall Cobb to Jordy Nelson compliment for the longest time, and none of their experiments worked. If they can get Tyler Lockett on a cheap deal on the cheap, which I don't think will happen, but if it does, that'd be pretty impressive.
I do like Jordan Love with the Packers and Jimmy Garoppolo back when he was with the Patriots. Like, they're the Spider-Man meme right now. Like, they're the guy drafted way too high to like motivate the veteran quarterback, and who ultimately outplays that guy's rookie deal and stays with the team and whatever. It is a fascinating dynamic. Obviously, once you start to get up in age with some of these all-time greats and guys, obviously, who have a lot of ego and self-worth and all of that. Certainly Rodgers is not lacking in any of that. But what you brought up with Tyler Lockett, people have talked about it even with a DK Metcalf. If the Seahawks actually had the stones to do something like that and get a massive return, Bobby Wagner's already been cut loose. Like, is this, are we, for the Seahawks, are they embracing the rebuild? I mean, is this them going into the tank for a couple of years, do you think?
Yes and no, because Carroll is in his 70s. I don't think he wants to do a rebuild.
Well, I don't think he wants to, but does the organization?
Right. But like those are one and the same. It's always been like Carroll is essentially like part GM, part owner in that organization. Because if he wasn't, Wilson would still be there and Carroll would have been long gone. Because look at what the last 2 or 3 years. Seattle really had, yes, the record has been fine, but had they really been competitive in that division, right? Like, truly, especially when the Legion of Boom went downhill. You never were really scared of the Seahawks. What you were scared of is Wilson with his fourth quarter magic. That's what you were afraid of, right? And so if that were the case, and like Wilson had his way, it would have been get guys in here who can actually make some plays and get an offensive coordinator that can open up this playbook and really try and do it that way. But that's never been the case because Pete Carroll has been head of state for that organization for so long. And what he says goes. And I don't think he does. I don't think he wants a rebuild. But having said that, Koff, like, what other choice do they have?
Right.
If you're looking at this organization long term, Arizona's going to re-sign Kyler. We know that, right? Trey Lance is with San Francisco. We know that. The Rams just won the Super Bowl. Seattle, you got to do something, right? Like the 12th man in all of this BS, you got to win games. And to win games, you got to have good players. Pretty simple. But right now they don't. So I think they have to be in a rebuild. And I think Carroll, that this might be the last time we see him this year. Like, I don't think he comes back.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and I know we haven't always had 17 game seasons, obviously, but 7-10 for Seattle last year is the worst year the Seahawks have had since going 5-11 in 2009, which was Jim Mora. That was the year before Pete Carroll came in, had back-to-back 7-9 seasons, and then they took off. It was double digits every year in terms of the wins, except for that 9-7 year where they missed the playoffs back in 2017. So they've been on a steady trajectory. I just think that, obviously, like it felt like this was going to happen last year. And, whether it was Russ sort of giving way or Carroll getting him to, buy in just one more time. I don't know how it all worked, obviously, behind the scenes, but they agreed, let's give it one more go at this. And it didn't work. It was as bad as it's ever been. But still, at this point in time, when you factor in, like you're talking about, Pete Carroll's age, this is a hell of a time to be going into uncharted territory. I mean, should we be convinced that Drew Lock is even the guy, or is there going to be a move coming here?
Drew Lock is not the guy anywhere. Like, he was never the guy. He was never.
Well, when I say the guy, I mean stopgap. I don't mean like the future.
Well, like Geno Smith. Why not Geno Smith, who was there, right? Who filled in, not great for Russell Wilson, but at least he knows the offense. He's been holding the clipboard for a few years there. So like, if that's the stopgap, like Drew Lock is, I don't know. Like, I think Drew Lock's hope, for at least from our perspective, because I'm sure he thinks otherwise, and as he should, because he's playing the games. But he should be he should try to be at a point and ascend to Mitch Trubisky level. Like that's what I feel like would be a good comp for Drew Lock. A really good backup quarterback in
Also
those
a guy
moments.
who could be available, by the way.
Right, for like those spot starts, right? Like you can put him in and he's competitive enough that you don't have to necessarily worry long term. Because Drew Lock, and shout out to Kenny Ducey, who's not gracing us with his presence anymore.
We miss him though. We see him on social media.
Right. Ducey was in love with Drew Lock. And I kept on telling the guy, Drew Lock had probably the lowest completion percentage of wide open players in the entire NFL. Right. When you can't hit a wide open wide receiver, you do not belong under center in the NFL. You can be in the Boston Commons under center, but you shouldn't be in the NFL. So like that scares me about Drew Lock. And sure, you get some picks, maybe you trade them away in a package somewhere else, because backup quarterbacks are extremely important in the NFL. And I think that's where Drew Lock is headed. That's fine. But Geno Smith, probably the guy. I know, rookie quarterback is the favorite for the next quarterback at like minus 150 for the Seahawks. Marcus Mariota is another name that I think would definitely fit there. And for Pete Carroll has mentioned he loves Kirk Cousins. That's a wild card. I don't think he moves, but that's how you kind of have to play with the Seahawks. The Seahawks are in a tough spot, and it does not look pretty for them this year.
Carson Wentz to Washington, to the Commanders. And I said it off the top of the show. I'm shocked that he commanded a pair of third-round picks as part of a package off the year that he had, which, I'll admit, was not a bad year. Carson Wentz was not bad last year. He wasn't good, but he wasn't bad. He was fine. He served a purpose, which is, part of what sort of shocked me about the fact that the Colts were able to rob Washington for what they did in order to get him in the first place. I'm curious what direction the Colts go in at quarterback, obviously, because that is an uncertain situation. Mm-hmm. But also, what should we expect here in Washington from Carson Wentz, who, it for years it was, all right, let's get him out of Philadelphia, goes to Indy. This is supposed to be the resurgence, and it was, again, mediocre.
Yeah, I forget the stat. I think Jesse mentioned on the Sweat this morning that he's the only quarterback to start for 3 different teams in 3 years on opening day. Under the age of 31, which is,
and well, I shouldn't say well under. He's where is he right now? He's 20. Yeah, he just turned 29 in December.
Okay, even worse, under 30. Yeah, right. Which means that you've only been in the league for 6-7 years, truly, and you're on 3 different teams in the last 3 years. Now there've been a lot of reports about Wentz that he was actively cheering against the Eagles when he was there, and he was benched for Nick Foles. Right. Even if that's not true, having those rumors out there, let's call that 10% true. You don't want that to be true at all.
Does that mean he doesn't have that Super Bowl ring on display in his home?
I don't think so. Right. So that number 2, if you mentioned that he was an okay quarterback. Yeah, but he had Jonathan Taylor right behind him. Yeah. And he had one of the best offensive lines in front of him. So the first 7 games, which is, I think, what a lot of us think about Carson Wentz last year. Right. This is what we do a lot with quarterbacks. This is what I'm sure a lot of the professional teams do with the quarterbacks. It's like, what's his peak and not his valley? His peak was MVP caliber, right? He was in the MVP conversation with Philly before he tore his ACL late in the season. So, okay. Number 2 was, he was actually pretty good in the first 7 games with the Colts, who played really well, but he wasn't asked to do anything in those first 7 games. I mean, they ran the ball much more than they threw it. And most of his passes were screens, the ones that were positive in his in his rap sheet were screens to Jonathan Taylor. When he was asked to do more, guy, the 7th worst in terms of turnover worthy plays, so the 7th highest in the NFL when he was asked to actually throw the ball. 7th worst. His decision making is poor at best, and we know that about Carson Wentz. Is he likes to sling it down, and for fantasy, for DFS. He's fine in a spot start here and there, right? Because he can do that, but he's not the guy. And look, he's better than Tyler Heineke, right? Or I always screw this up. It's Taylor Heineke.
Taylor, yeah.
Better than Taylor.
I remember
Heineke.
that day that we looked up Tyler
Yeah.
though, and we
There's
didn't find it.
Tylers, there's Taylors. I'm like the golf. There's Taylor Gooch. There's
Yeah.
it's all over the place. Here.
Yeah, it's all
Tylers
over
and the Taylors. Just
Sure.
figure it out, Reed. Heineke. He's better than Heineke, right? We know that. PFF scoring in terms of grade, he's better than Heineke. So the offense gets a bump up, but marginally. Cough. These guys don't get a huge bump up. It's a lot of it is probably window shopping and saying, hey, look, we need to get a quarterback because we tried last year with Matt Stafford and didn't go through. Let's try and make a big name, a big splash. Carson Wentz was that guy. So I don't like it one bit. I get why I can understand why they did it, but why, right? Just save your capital, your draft capital. And because I do think that in the third round, you could probably get someone better than Carson Wentz long term, right? As opposed to not. So
what's fascinating to me too is if you look again, DraftKings Sportsbook, the AFC South division, the Titans are plus 100, no surprise to win the division. The Colts come in second at plus 140, only marginally behind, plus 140. And we don't even know who their quarterback is going to be week one. I am not a believer that it's going to be, Sam Ellinger or JC Morgan or James Morgan, pardon me. And I don't even know who JC Morgan is. And then the Jaguars at plus 750 in that mess that existed last year. And then the Texans, and we don't have certainty, obviously, on Deshaun Watson's playing future, plus 2,200. I mean, if you're a believer that somehow, some way, Deshaun Watson is not only going to be available, but also be quarterback of the Houston Texans this year, holy crap, buy a ticket at that number right there in this disaster of a division at plus 2,200. But the fact that the Colts are sitting second right now after dealing away their quarterback and not getting one back is just, boy, does that speak volumes of this division.
Yeah, and it speaks volumes of the team that they have right now, right? Sports books don't want the liability of, right? They probably had a lot of futures that were put on Denver, right? And at a decent number. And you don't want to do that with Indianapolis, right? Because in case someone like a Derek Carr goes there, like the Colts have the most cap space now. Getting rid of Carson Wentz, they have the highest cap space, the most in the NFL. So they can do what they want. If they call the Raiders and they offer them a pretty good price and the Raiders, they pull the trigger, then you have a quarterback, a worthy quarterback with Derek Carr with the Colts now that just need that player, right? Look at what happened with the Rams. I'm not saying the Colts are the Rams, but now you see what these teams are. It's a copycat league. You see what these teams are doing. Is they're setting the successful ones, is they're building the infrastructure, even if the quarterback's not there. So when a quarterback can come in like a Matt Ryan, right, for instance, or someone like Jimmy Garoppolo, who's not a top echelon quarterback, you don't need that, right? You don't need that. Matt Stafford was fantastic, and that's an exception to the rule, I think. But everyone's trying to find the next Patrick Mahomes, the next Kyler Murray, the next Lamar Jackson, and also the next Matt Stafford, who was kind of the next Ryan Tannehill, but a lot better. So like that's what most of these teams are doing. So Jimmy Garoppolo is probably my favorite to go there. The Colts right now, they're probably going to make a pretty suitable offer for him. But I wouldn't count out someone like Derek Carr or Kirk Cousins if the price is right.
Do the odds change like all that much? Like, let's say Jimmy Garoppolo goes from San Fran to Indy. Do the Colts become favorites to win that division? Are they still behind the Titans? Is it
maybe
still plus 140? Like, what does anything really change there?
I think it does, because Garoppolo is a better quarterback than whoever they have right now.
For sure.
Right? So I do think they change.
But I'm just looking at how close they are to the Titans as it is.
I think they change. I think they might go to plus 120, because if you take a look at the 49ers, they were extremely close.
Yeah.
They were extremely close, and the 49ers did not have a secondary too, right? And so, and like you might say that they're just the Packers kryptonite, but they were close. Now, is that Jimmy Garoppolo in that offense with Kyle Shanahan? Maybe, but he can get his team to that. He can get his offense to that point. So yeah, I think it does come down a little bit.
Just one more thing before we go over to golf and the players. I want to look at the NFC East, because obviously we're talking about Carson Wentz going over to Washington, sitting second behind Dallas right now, plus 400 odds to win that division, which I think feels right. I'd still have Washington even or ahead of the Eagles, which is where we stand, and obviously ahead of the Giants and behind Dallas. So the placement feels right. But do you like the number
for the Commanders?
Yeah.
No. I'm just not sold on that move whatsoever. Right? Like what has materially changed? And Landon Collins on the defensive side, I believe they're releasing Landon Collins on the defense. Now he wasn't this, this Bobby Wagner type of player in the middle, but he was, a player that could wreak some havoc and guard the tight ends, which you want against Philly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which you want against Dallas, which you want, maybe not the Giants, but you want against those two teams. So I'm not convinced that Carson Wentz gets him over the edge, because it's his decision making. It's he knows this division, obviously, but the decision making late, which is what you need late in the season to win this type of bet, because it's probably going to be close again. This division is always close. That's what you worry about. So for me, actually, I think the Eagles, that's enticing, right? I don't know why everyone is so down on the Eagles. Like they flash, and Jalen Hurts is not this Russell Wilson quarterback, but he's also not Carson Wentz. So I don't think he's that bad. And I think plus 400 for the Eagles isn't necessarily bad.
Quick question from our guy, Luke Murphy, in the chat, trying to figure out a showdown lineup for Nets Sixers. Anyone like anybody from 1,600 to 1,000, or should I pivot to a no punt play? Yeah, we got just a 2-gamer in the NBA tonight, so it's less about the classic, more about the showdowns, and obviously a projected great game, Nets and Sixers. Shake Milton at a grand, buddy. That's your answer. Shake Milton, without a doubt. Players Championship read, and at the moment, Tommy Fleetwood at 6 under. He's the leader in the clubhouse. He's 1 stroke ahead of Kramer Hickok. Is that how did I say that right? And then you have Keith Mitchell, who is very much in contention to be the leader at the end of the day. He is 1 stroke back. He is only through 14, so he's obviously got a ways to go. You have Joaquin Neiman is still in the course, sitting 2 strokes back, although he is through 17. Tom Hoagie is there as well, sitting just 2 shots off the lead. He's got 3 holes to go. What do you think of what we've seen here on day one?
The course is really soft, but I don't expect we even play tomorrow. There's supposed to be some pretty inclement weather coming through, and so like the course is extremely soft. You're not going to see it like this. You can't really glean a ton from right now, because it's going to be a different course tomorrow, and then the next few days it's probably going to be a lot softer than what even like the March date already has from the May, which is the softer, colder conditions. But this is what we've been saying all week, is that the weather is going to dictate a lot of this. And so you're just trying to feel that out right now. You're trying to stay patient for your outright bets, your DFS lineups. Mm-hmm. You're just trying to stay patient because half the field hasn't even played, right? Or if they had, like, they're just going out now, right? And sunset is like in less than an hour. So these guys are going to have 2 holes. And look, we might not even get to golf tomorrow because the weather is supposed to be very bad tomorrow. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's no golf tomorrow, or if there is minimal golf. So, which is, you're probably going to have a Monday finish, which no one really likes, but that's what we get. So there's not really a lot right now. And look, Tommy Fleetwood, he's been poor for the last 2 tournaments, but he's played well here. And so that's what you kind of see with Tommy Fleetwood. I just didn't even hit the ball well. He got some lucky bounces. It's lift clean in place. And so if the ball's embedded into the ground, he can take it out, wipe it off, and then place it, right? That's a huge advantage. So when you get that, and you get some lucky bounces here or there, Fleetwood should have been at least, like, if he didn't get those lucky bounces, he probably would have been at 5 under, 4 under. But he's got, and that's what you need to win sometimes, right, Koff, is you need those lucky bounces. Mm-hmm. So still a lot of golf left. There's still a ton of players who haven't even teed it up yet.
Why aren't you there providing us on-site coverage?
That's not a question for me, Adam Kaufman. That's a question for someone else that I've been asking quite a bit.
Hey guys, I'm around.
I digress.
It's your wife wanted you home. That's what it is.
Yeah. It's Julian Edlow's fault. How about that?
Well, it could be Buke's fault. He's tying up all DraftKings money in throwing a big party to celebrate the return of baseball.
Bukes. Jeez. I mean,
we get to keep him around.
He's very active on Twitter, though. Buchanan, it felt like we were in a lockout again or a lockdown. And Buchanan was very active on Twitter, responding to certain people from VSiN, responding to other tweets, doing this, doing that, responding to Brandon Glasheen.
Sure.
So at least he was very active on Twitter. So when we go to our annual review, we can at least go back to the all of the interactions.
Point to all the tweets.
Here's what I did.
It didn't go dark.
I interacted on Twitter. So impressions.
Goodness gracious. Well, we're about out of time here, unfortunately, but we do have a night full of Madden Sims coming your way. Madden 22. Enjoy it. You know, even though the football season is not going on right now, the virtual season, the Sim season, all good in Simland, and you get to, you know, still experience Carson Wentz as an Indianapolis Colt and Russell Wilson as a Seattle Seahawk just that much longer, folks. But remember, in Green Bay, nothing changes. Aaron Rodgers, he's back. Complete coverage, obviously, the Players' Championship throughout the week on the Sweat in the morning, the Slate in the afternoon, certainly all over Reed's Twitter, so pay attention to that. We appreciate everyone hanging out here with us. Undercover Boss Tom, our technical director, Eamon, our producer. I'm Adam Kaufman. He is Reed T. Fowler. We appreciate you being with us. Back tomorrow for more talk, including a look at what will be a much larger slate in the NBA. So that'll be a good time as well. Thanks for being with us, Reed. We'll see you, buddy.
All right, bud.